Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City, here is Steve Malzberg.
And I'm always willing to compromise if folks have other ideas or if it advances generally the interests of working Americans. But so far this year, Republicans in Congress have blocked every serious idea to strengthen the middle class. Lifting the minimum wage, fair pay, student loan reform, they've said no to all of it. And that's when I've acted this year to help working Americans on my own, when Congress won't act.
And now they're going to sue me. Maybe they don't like me. Where's that part? All right, folks, so welcome back. Joining us now to talk about the future of the U.S. economy is Richard Vague, managing partner of Gabriel Investments. Great to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in. The book, The Next Economic Disaster: Why It's Coming and How to Avoid It. You see it there up on the screen. Okay, the book takes an interesting. It gives a bunch of interesting information on this, which I found surprising. You always think of government debt and the problems that that brings to an economy. You talk about a lot in the book private debt and how that is detrimental to our economy and how it will further be a detriment in the future. How so?
That's right. I mean, private debt is a wonderful thing. The problem is when it grows too rapidly. And very rapid, or what we call runaway private debt growth, is what caused the crisis of '07. But it also caused every major financial crisis that we can see in this century. The Japan crisis of '91, the Asian crisis of '97, and on and on. That's because you're building way too much capacity too fast, beyond what you need, and you're incurring bad debt as you do that. In this most recent crisis, we created $2.5 trillion worth of bad loans. The U.S. capital banking system only has $1.5 trillion of capital.
So when you talk about private debt, you're talking about bank debt, you're talking about mortgage kind of thing, bad mortgage.
Yeah,
So you're not talking about the average consumer, or are you both? Talking about them getting in over their heads and underwater as well?
Absolutely. It's the whole thing. It's business and consumer debt. There's about $26 trillion in private debt out there today. About 55% of that is business, 45% of that is consumer. Most consumer debt is mortgages.
The next economic disaster, when is it coming?
Well,
and will it be due mostly to private debt?
Absolutely.
Or is it a company? It will. Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely. You know, we see China as the area for concern. You know, every single financial meltdown that we've had, crisis that we've had that's threatened the banking system, has been this runaway private debt. We say it's about 20% to GDP in 5 years. Right now in China, their private debt to GDP has grown 50% in 5 years. Our aggregate private debt to GDP is 156%. Theirs is 180%. They are in the zone. I think they can prevent it if they act decisively, but they might not, and if they don't, it could spiral out of control.
Is it within their interests? Would it serve them well to rein it in, or not?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, they're at a point where they've built. You've read about the ghost cities in China. They have been so interested in growing rapidly for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is appearance, that they have, you know, many ghost cities, completely empty cities with gleaming buildings. They have unsold ships. They have overcapacity in steel. They've built too much. Their economy, the demand has not caught up.
But people are out there watching and saying, "What do I give a darn about China? Well, so what if they go belly up? How's that going to affect us?"
Well, you know, in a sense, you know, we're not that close to it, but there's going to be spillover. It's the second largest economy in the world. You know, it's estimated to be 8 or 9 trillion to our 17 trillion. There's going to be a lot of impact if there's a crisis on their neighbors, Korea, Vietnam, Australia. But we'll feel it all around the world, at least somewhat. And one of the ways we'll feel it is in reduced aggregate global demand, which will have an impact on our GDP growth.
So this is separate and apart from when we hear about China. Usually it's that they own us, and you know, everything we pay for from a governmental point of view, and governmental buying is China's paying for
Yeah,
it.
but that's not true.
Okay.
You know, we have 17 trillion in government debt. About $1.3 trillion of it is in China's hands.
Okay, so that's overblown.
That's
as a
overblown. And in
point.
fact, if we owe somebody, that kind of makes them a little more obligated to us than the other
You
way
would
around.
think, you would
As
think.
Alexander Hamilton pointed out with our original federal debt.
Yeah, no, you would think. All right, so how do we avoid it? Now, when you say on the next economic disaster, why it's coming in and how to avoid it, are you talking to the individual person, or are you talking globally and as a world and as a nation, how we avoided it?
Well, I think the specific responsibility for China lies in the hands of the Chinese government.
Right.
And they could act preemptively. We estimate there's $2 trillion plus in bad debt in the banking system there. You know, the corporate debt in China is greater than corporate debt in the United States. It's $14 trillion. They could act preemptively to recapitalize their banks and have banks restructure the debt with their corporations. Will they do that? Well, I don't know. I mean, that's a fairly complex operation that requires a lot of insight. So that's out there, and I think it's something to be apprehensive about.
And what should folks do here, individuals, like people with 401ks and 529s for their kids' college? Should they dump? Should they, and what should they do?
Well, I think it's something, if you're working with a financial advisor, is just to ask them to avoid exposure to Asia currently.
Okay, so there's no need to panic and figure that equities will all of a sudden
I think
tank.
the issue in the U.S. is that we're just, in the aftermath of the crisis, we're carrying around too much debt. You know, people don't recognize this, but in 1950, private debt, this same business plus consumer debt we were talking about, was 55% of GDP. Today it's 156%.
That's amazing.
It's tripled in a
It's
little over 2
unsustainable, is it not?
It's unsustainable. And in fact, the fact that we're carrying around this mountain of debt is what keeps economic growth suppressed.
Yeah.
You know, we're looking at all these other things. The thing to look at is private debt.
And the reason the market is are we reaching a bubble, do you think? I know it's off topic a little bit. But
No, it's on topic. I mean, I think there's so many borrowers overburdened with so much debt, and I'm not talking about the government. I'm talking about businesses and consumers. That, I think, has been the central motivation for the Fed to keep rates low, to keep folks who are in a critical situation from going belly up. When they've been doing this, they've been inappropriately inflating other markets. So we have a lot of ancillary consequences to what is, I think, a necessary policy.
Great book, great information. I thank you, folks. Pick it up and find out more about the next economic disaster by Richard Vague and why it's coming and how to avoid it. Something certainly that everybody out there is interested in and should be very, very concerned about. All right, folks, so we're coming back with much more right here on the Steve Malzberg Show, only on Newsmax Television. Don't go away.